A heavy silence hung over the barren land, where nothing but dust and jagged stones marked the landscape. The only sound was the hum of the expedition team's equipment and the murmured discussions among scientists who were on the verge of an extraordinary discovery. Dr. Elena Kovac, lead geologist, squinted against the sun, studying the arid expanse that stretched endlessly before them. She had dedicated years to studying geological anomalies and seismic disturbances, yet this site was different. A series of deep tremors had led them here. The patterns were too regular, too rhythmic, to be natural. When the instruments picked up what looked like an underground cavity, she knew it warranted exploration, even if a part of her felt a gnawing sense of foreboding. Dr. Kovac, we've confirmed the hollow structure, one of the technicians called out. It's massive, and it doesn't look like any natural formation we've seen. Her curiosity burned, and soon the team prepared to descend into the earth. They lowered themselves through a narrow shaft, rough stone giving way to metal as they descended deeper. Their lights sliced through the dense darkness, revealing walls that were surprisingly smooth, coated with a glossy material that gleamed even in their faint beams. The further they ventured, the more surreal it became. The walls were etched with strange patterns, flowing curves that formed symbols, an alien language that none of them recognized. Though the air was stale and cold, something within the walls seemed to throb with life. Finally, they reached a vast chamber, so wide and so high that their lights barely touched the far edges. The walls here were a blend of organic and metallic, twisted in alien configurations that seemed to defy the limits of engineering. Tendrils of an unknown material connected from wall to wall like biological conduits, darkened and pulsing as though once filled with life. It was a strange fusion of machine and organism, and it left the entire team uneasy. This isn't just a cave," whispered James, the team's biologist, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "This was built. We're standing in a structure made by an intelligence we can't begin to understand." The tension in the chamber was almost suffocating. Even as scientists trained to seek truth and knowledge, they felt a primal fear, a feeling that they were intruders in a place that had long been abandoned, but not forgotten. Elena steadied herself, trying to control her breathing. "Let's document everything," she ordered, her voice calm but hollow. "Photographs, samples, let's get it all." The team set to work, photographing the chamber, analyzing the strange organic machinery embedded in the walls. Every surface seemed engineered, yet alive, as if it had grown into place rather than being constructed. They found what appeared to be screens, dimly flickering with faded symbols, as if awaiting a command that hadn't been issued in eons. Every object, every surface, seemed to hint at a purpose beyond their understanding. As they ventured deeper into the structure, they found an inner sanctum, a smaller chamber nestled within the heart of the complex. Here, the air felt thicker, tinged with a metallic taste that clung to their tongues. Dark, skeletal remains of alien creatures lay scattered around, slumped against the walls, their bones elongated and unfamiliar, their skin desiccated yet clinging to skeletal frames like dried parchment. The sight of them sent a shiver through the team. Whatever had happened here had been violent, and these beings had met a grotesque fate. The team's anthropologist, Zara, leaned over one of the alien skeletons, her hands trembling. They must have died centuries, maybe millennia ago, but the decay? It's almost unnatural, like something preserved them. Their bodies looked like they died only yesterday. Elena stepped closer, her gaze locked onto the haunting, empty eye sockets of one of the creatures. They were trapped here, dying long after they should have. Something kept them in this state. Some kind of stasis? James moved his flashlight to the ceiling, illuminating a structure that looked like a central console, dormant but ominous. A tangled mass of tendrils snaked from it, connecting to the walls and the remains of the creatures on the ground. The team stared in silence, a collective realization sinking in. This chamber wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a control room, and perhaps a prison. As James inspected the central console, his gloved hand brushed a small, faintly glowing emblem on the side. He hesitated, unsure if he should touch it, but a strange compulsion overtook him. Before Elena could warn him, he pressed it, and immediately the chamber came to life. The room shuddered as lights blinked on along the walls, casting an unnatural glow. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their bodies and triggering a feeling of nausea. Gases began seeping from the walls, a noxious mist that filled their lungs and coated their skin with a clammy residue. Alarms blared, low-frequency sounds that seemed to awaken something in the depths of the structure. The lights shifted, revealing shapes embedded in the walls, ovoid pods, each encased in a translucent membrane, beginning to twitch and pulse. "James, what did you do?" Zara shouted, covering her mouth as she coughed from the thickening gas. James, pale and wide-eyed, stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. I don't know. I thought it was just a marking." Elena's instincts screamed at her to leave, to get her team out, but the exits were already closing, metal slats dropping into place with a thud. They were trapped. As the pods along the walls began to split open, thin tendrils reached out, stretching and writhing as if tasting the air. The creatures within began to unfurl, their segmented bodies shimmering in the low light, their clawed appendages stretching as they adjusted to the environment once more. They were unlike anything the team had seen, twisted, insect-like creatures with semi-translucent skin and multiple unblinking eyes that reflected a cruel intelligence. A piercing shriek echoed through the chamber, an alien sound that cut through their skulls. The creatures had sensed them. Slowly, the aliens emerged from their pods, moving with a jerky, predatory grace that suggested they had once been apex hunters, and now they were reawakening to reclaim their territory. The team backed into each other, staring in frozen horror as the creatures advanced, their heads twitching, insectoid mouths opening to reveal needle-thin, proboscis-like appendages that dripped with an unknown fluid. The stench was unbearable, a mix of decaying flesh and acidic bile. The creatures observed the humans with a curiosity that bordered on hunger. Dr. Kovac took a step back, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to find a way out. Now." As they turned, scrambling toward the walls, one of the creatures lunged forward, its proboscis slicing through the air and grazing Zara's arm. She screamed, clutching her forearm, as a slick, dark liquid began to spread over her skin, burning through her suit. Her skin bubbled, veins darkening beneath the surface, as if something was spreading under her flesh. Panic surged through the group, but they could only watch as the infection spread along her arm, skin cracking and splitting open to reveal something writhing underneath, something that wasn't hers anymore. Desperation filled Dr. Kovac as she pulled Zara back, her mind racing for a solution, but the reality was sinking in. They had disturbed something ancient, something that should have remained forgotten. And now, trapped miles underground with creatures that had waited centuries to feed again, they were entirely at its mercy. The hum of the bass grew louder, as if it were aware of them, as if it had been waiting. And as the aliens began to surround them, Elena knew this was only the beginning. The walls continued to hum, a low, throbbing sound that vibrated through the bones of the expedition team. It was as if the entire base had a pulse, an ancient rhythm that had reawakened, sensing their presence. What had felt like a lifeless tomb now radiated with an ominous energy that set every nerve on edge. Dr. Elena Kovac gripped her flashlight tightly, her mind racing as she scanned the room for an escape. Beside her, Zara clutched her blistered, infected arm, beads of sweat trickling down her forehead. The other team members backed away, their eyes darting between the walls, where pods continued to split open, spilling translucent, slick creatures that writhed in the pale light. "We need to keep moving," Elena hissed, the urgency in her voice cutting through the thickening fog of fear. But their path was anything but clear. Alien structures lined the walls, their purposes unfathomable, some appearing like biological control panels, others strange tubes that pulsed with a bioluminescent liquid flowing in jagged pathways along the walls. The creatures, skeletal insect-like beings with segmented limbs and elongated heads, moved with a horrific grace. With every step they adjusted, their mandibles twitching, as if tasting the air for the team's scent. James, the biologist, stumbled backward as one of the aliens scuttled closer, its unblinking eyes fixed on him with a curious yet predatory gaze. They're analyzing us," he whispered, voice barely above a tremor. "Like we're prey." The humid air thickened as tendrils of gas seeped from vents along the walls. Elena felt it sting her throat, a noxious, acidic odor that settled in her lungs like needles. Breathing became difficult. Her chest felt tight, her pulse pounding in her ears. She couldn't shake the feeling that this gas wasn't just toxic, it was somehow alive, carrying spores or particles that interacted with their very cells. As they stumbled further into the base, the mist clinging to their skin, Elena noticed dark veins rising under her arms and neck, faint but spreading, like webs of infection. The others had it too, their skin showing signs of blotchy discoloration, eyes glassy, as if the gas was having an effect beyond simple poisoning. Zara, still clutching her infected arm, winced as the dark veins bulged, her skin beginning to crack and peel, revealing a strange, fibrous tissue beneath. The team reached a wider corridor, but here the gas was even thicker, swirling around in ghostly tendrils that clung to their bodies like vines. As they moved, Elena noticed that the walls seemed to respond, subtly shifting, their organic surfaces contracting and expanding, exhaling the foul mist into the corridor. She realized with a shiver that the base itself was alive, biological tissue fused with metal, responding to stimuli like a creature with its own nervous system. They had to get out, but every corridor twisted into another, and every door led them further into the maze. Zara gasped, doubling over, her skin taking on a pallid, translucent hue. Elena moved to help her, but she stopped, her breath catching. Beneath Zara's torn skin, something was writhing, thin, hair-like tendrils twitching and growing, pushing outward like roots searching for air. Elena stumbled back in horror, watching as Zara's body contorted, the alien infection rooting itself within her flesh. "Elena, please." Zara's voice was a broken whisper, her eyes glazed with agony and desperation. Before Elena could reach out, James held her back, his voice thick with terror. "She's gone. Whatever this gas is, it's inside us. It's changing us. No, we have to..." Elena's voice broke, the helplessness sinking in. A screech echoed through the corridor, the sound of claws scraping against metal as more creatures began to emerge, moving with greater confidence, sensing the team's weakness. The largest of them slithered forward, towering over them, its skin translucent enough to reveal an array of pulsing organs, some lined with needle-like structures that quivered with anticipation. The creature's mandibles opened, revealing a proboscis lined with serrated edges, a terrifying biological weapon. It seemed to inspect the team with its reflective, multifaceted eyes, emitting a soft clicking noise. Then, with a sickening lurch, it struck, its proboscis stabbing into Zara's abdomen, injecting a thick, glistening fluid. Zara's body seized, her muscles tensing as the fluid spread, her skin tightening, her veins thickening. They could only watch as her transformation accelerated, alien spores knitting into her flesh, reshaping her body to match something familiar yet horrifically alien. Unable to look away, Elena felt her own body rebelling. Her skin itched, muscles convulsed, and an unbearable heat pulsed under her skin, as if the alien contagion inside her was awakening, amplifying with every breath. She fought to focus, to suppress the feeling that her body was no longer hers to control. "Keep moving," she shouted, forcing herself to look away from Zara, who had fallen silent, her skin now fully transparent, revealing grotesque alien organs sprouting within. The team fled deeper into the maze, their vision blurred, minds clouded, each step a painful battle as their bodies succumbed to the alien infection. The corridor ahead split into several paths, each lined with darkened, quivering pods that had yet to open. More creatures stirred within, held in stasis, awaiting release. Elena felt a grim realization settle in. Each chamber was a separate hive, dormant until activated. They had entered a colony, and it was waking up with them inside it. As they stumbled into the next chamber, a faint light flickered, revealing a massive organic structure at the center of the room. A pulsating core. It was a hive heart, alive and intelligent, an enormous brain-like mass wrapped in sinewy fibers, beating with a slow, malevolent rhythm. The sight of it sent a chill through Elena. She felt its awareness, like a lurking predator, its intentions cold and calculating. What is that?" James whispered, voice trembling as they stared. "It's their hive mind," Elena said, barely audible. "It's controlling them, and it's aware of us." The walls around them shifted again, sealing their exits. Tendrils extended from the hive heart, snaking along the ground, drawn toward the team. They moved slowly, deliberately, sensing them like antennae, probing the air. Each tendril was covered in fine, spiked hairs, and as they reached the team, they wrapped around their ankles, pulling them toward the core, dragging them closer to the pulsating mass. The closer they were pulled, the more the infection within them intensified. Elena's vision blurred, her mind clouding with a dizzying array of foreign sensations and thoughts that weren't her own. A strange impulse surfaced, a desire to merge with the hive, to surrender to it, to let it take control. She fought it, but the thought gnawed at her, growing louder, stronger, with every heartbeat. James, unable to resist, let out a strangled cry as he collapsed, his hands clawing at his own flesh, desperately trying to tear out the alien tissue rooting within him. The infection was no longer subtle. It was visible under his skin, dark veins creeping upward, his fingers elongating, splitting open to reveal thin, writhing appendages that felt alien in his grasp. Elena forced herself to look away, swallowing the scream that threatened to escape her. They were losing themselves, becoming extensions of the hive. With a surge of desperation, she managed to tear herself free from the tendrils, wrenching her body away from the hive's pull. Her skin burned, her limbs felt foreign, but she knew that stopping was certain death. She grabbed James by his arm, forcing him to stand, ignoring his delirious mumblings, his eyes no longer fully human. "We have to go. We have to get out, or we're already dead," she rasped, dragging him forward, willing herself to ignore the eerie sensation of her own body transforming, betraying her. Together they stumbled into another passage, barely evading the tendrils that slashed out, trying to reclaim them. The alien creatures were following, their eyes tracking the team with a fierce, hungry awareness. The hive was awake, its minions relentless, unyielding in their pursuit. As they ran, Elena felt a haunting certainty. Their infection was irreversible. Their bodies were already halfway claimed, transformed, and soon their minds would follow. The only question left was how much of themselves they could retain before they became one with the hive. In the dim, strobe-like flicker of alien light, the last remnants of humanity within Elena fought for survival, even as her body and mind succumbed to the hive's insidious pull. Continuation of the story. Watch it tomorrow.